won. The party leaders are set to square off in the French debate tomorrow night, but that debate was up against the Montreal Canadiens' final regular season game, a game that could decide if the Habs are going to the playoffs. So the debate has now been moved up to 6 p.m. after the Bloc and the NDP objected, saying people shouldn't have to choose between Canada's future and the Canadiens. Meanwhile, there are new questions about why the Greens are even invited to that debate stage, as the party doesn't appear to meet the required threshold. We'll explain why. And Conservatives spent weeks attacking Liberal leader Mark Carney for his work at Brookfield. Turns out some of the loudest Conservative critics are personally invested in the very same company. It's day 24 of the election campaign. Power and Politics starts right now. All right, the Power Panel is standing by to weigh in on all of today's developments, look ahead to the debates, and of course break down the Habs' chances of making the hockey playoffs. But first, tomorrow's French language debate was facing that tough competition for TV viewership. The Montreal Canadiens are playing their final regular season game, and it could be their last chance to clinch a playoff spot. So in true Canadian fashion, the debate's being moved up by 2 hours to 6 p.m. Eastern. Liberal leader Mark Carney acknowledged the competing events earlier today.
I'm going to concentrate on neither attack nor defense, but I will focus on transparency to inform those Canadians who choose to watch the debate instead of the Habs game, and we'll leave it to the Habs to decide the right combination of attack and defense over the course of the grand match.
But this was no laughing matter for Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet. He, along with the NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, were asking for the debate to be moved.
I would like anybody else, to watch the game. But now I believe that some questions are very serious about Canada's future and Quebec's future, and maybe some attention should be given to the debate. If the date can be changed, let's do that. I will, of course, make myself available at any moment.
All right, joining me now is the CBC's Jonathan Montpetit, who is a huge Canadiens fan, as well as a Quebec political journalist. Okay, Jonathan, the most important election of our lifetime, but hockey still is more important, at least in debate schedule. But talk about this game, the math. Why is this game tomorrow so crucial for the Habs?
Well, the Habs right now are in the final playoff spot in their division. They have a 4-point cushion, and basically they are being chased by Columbus. Now, if Columbus wins tonight, that means the Canadiens have to win their final game, which is on Wednesday, and would coincide with the debate. And so basically the Habs season, if Columbus wins tonight, will come down to the outcome of that game at the Bell Center on Wednesday. So, for Habs fans, this would obviously be must-see TV.
Okay, so this was a season. They were written off, not expected to do anything truly great. Had a very high draft pick, if I remember. But, I mean, this would obviously mean a lot for the province should the Habs make it and get on a playoff run.
Yeah, no question. I mean, nobody gave him a chance at the start of the season. Like, look, I'm trying to get my girlfriend's kid into hockey. He's 6. And I wouldn't even show him the Canadiens games because I didn't want to scar him early on. It looks so different now. If you're out in the streets of Montreal, you see people with the Canadian flags on their cars. There's that buzz that the city gets around playoff time. And we haven't had that for several years. Habs haven't made the playoffs since 2011. And so, again, like for Canadiens fans, we feel there's something special about the team. It's a young team, there's a lot of exciting players. And strange things happen in Montreal when the Canadiens make the playoffs.
Okay, and look, I'm sure everybody's like, why are you talking about hockey? We're not turning into a sports show, but this matters in terms of the audience for this debate, right? We had Tout le monde en parle on Sunday. Jonathan, a big audience there. But if the Habs were up against this debate, and the Habs are in a win and in scenario, I mean, what is the sense people have of what this would mean for the actual number of viewers who would watch this French debate tomorrow night?
So, I mean, something interesting to keep in mind is that the last 2 French debates in the federal elections have had huge audiences, over 4 million, 5 million, in fact, in 2019, a little 4.3 million in 2021. Now, obviously, that's across the country, but we can imagine that a big part of that comes from Quebec. It's higher proportionally than for the English debates. So if you kind of have the figure of something like 4 million people would be watching the debates, a Habs playoff game usually gets around 1 million viewers. So it would definitely be eating into the audience for the debate. And I think that the French debate is all the more important this year because unlike in past years, there hasn't been the TVA face-à-face debate. This is the first time Quebecers and French-speaking Canadians will see the leaders really face off against each other.
Okay, but just as a final point, if the Flyers are playing, it's the Hurricanes, right? Tonight?
Right, and so whoever...
So if the Flyers win tonight, none of this matters, and we've moved the debate for no reason.
Exactly.
I just want to drive that home.
Flyers, I got the teams confused. That's right. If Philly wins tonight, then we have moved the debate for nothing.
Right.
But if Philly loses tonight, then it absolutely Habs have to win, and there will be a lot of grateful political Canadiens fans.
Okay. Jonathan Monpetit, thank you for walking us through this latest episode in the most bizarre election of my lifetime. We're going to talk about all of this with the Power Panel. Joining me now is Françoise Boivin, Sherelle Evelyn, Kate Harrison, and Michelle Cadario. Okay. Go Flyers, I guess. All right. So,
yes, you got it.
So, Françoise, let's start there. They've moved this up to 6 o'clock. This changes a lot of plans we had for our show for tomorrow, by the way. Is this the right move? Like, is this that big of, I'm not trying to downplay, but is this that big of a collision in audience, as Jonathan says, that millions and millions of people just would not have watched this debate?
It's quite right. I agree with Jonathan. I mean, on Mordu Politique today, we had a full segment on it. We have to take this in perspective, though. Mr. Blanchette had no idea that it had succeeded before because he was asked by, I think it was Julienne Lapointe from Radio-Canada, if he intended on asking the commission. And at the time, it was not the commission, it was the different networks who had agreed to change the date. So at first, his reaction was like, no, because I don't think it's going to be for any avail. And she said, well, it worked in 2011 when Mr. Duceppe asked for it. So it's like, oh, well, that is tempting. And from that moment on, you could feel in my province, a whole shift. Now it became possible to watch the hockey game and also watch the debate. So it put pressure on the other leaders. Usually you need to have them agreeing with the change. And I think the population, there's some people who say you should never change this for mere hockey. But when in Quebec, there's two love. I mean, hockey and politics, you're torn between the two. So I think it was the right decision. But to change the date would have been wrong.
Yeah, that would have been a problem.
To just change the time, I mean, yeah, it complicates your life and some chroniqueurs' life. But all in all, I think it was the right decision for people. Because people want to watch.
Yeah.
Jonathan was saying it, because we want to see Mr. Carney in a position of a debate. How does he stand to Mr. Poiliev and the others and Monsieur Blanchette? So and Monsieur Singh. It should be interesting.
Okay, I have to correct myself. It's the Columbus Blue Jackets. Sorry, the Hurricanes would be the game Montreal plays tomorrow. It's Columbus playing the Flyers tonight. So just for those of you keeping score at home, Michelle, they have been moved before, but with multiple days' notice for an actual playoff game. This is just what do you make of this adjustment to the schedule?
Well, I think it's smart. First of all, it's something that all the leaders and all the parties actually agreed on. So, mark that as first time in a very long time.
Consensus.
And secondly, it's probably going to draw in more people who are deciding that they're going to sit down and watch the hockey game. Maybe they'll tune in for that hour ahead of time and actually see more of the debate. So I think making debates more accessible for more people is absolutely the right thing to do, and it feels unbelievably Canadian, because where else would that happen? So bravo to all of them.
Kate, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, bias disclosed. My dad was a friend of Bob Gainey, and he's a legendary Canadian, so I'll be, trying to keep a foot on both logs and watch the debate and take in the game. But I think this actually underscores a bit of a broader point, which is only one official debate in each language. Is that actually enough? Not a whole lot of options to pivot. There's 12 days left in this campaign.
Yeah.
I would have liked to see more campaigns. If the TVA debate had occurred, we would have had another opportunity to see the leaders face off against each other in French. So I think it was the right decision, but I kind of go back to this, whether or not one debate in each official language is actually enough with only 11, 12 days before people actually head to the polls.
Yeah, as an Atlantic Canadian, I've always felt we should have regional debates
That's another
and
great
let local
point.
candidates debates.
Yeah,
for
like
example.
that debate is now going to be, 3 p.m. on the West Coast?
Columbia.
Yeah.
Who's tuning in?
Yeah, Sherelle, well, I get that. I mean, I know there are francophones outside of Quebec, but, New Brunswick and Quebec would be predominantly where this is focused
sure.
at. So the time frame still works, though an imperfect solution in well, let's face it, Sherelle, an unusual election.
Yeah, it is unusual, and it does drive home the whole thing that you always come back to, like, why is the West so angry? Why do they think Quebec and the East get special treatment? Well, this is why. Obviously, yes, we know that it is an important thing. You want as many people to tune in as possible, and it's not like we're stuck on regular satellite TV. You don't terrestrial television. You don't have to tune in at precisely 6 p.m. Eastern to watch this debate. You can watch it whenever you want, after it's aired. So that I think would have been the other, had they not decided to move the debate, like that would have been, I think, maybe perhaps the fallback. And they said, well, you know what, everybody will watch later. When their TV shows are looking at their ratings, they're looking at, the times that everybody else was watching, not just the second it aired. But it is an important thing for people to sit down and realize that this is, as you said, the only opportunity people are going to really have to see how the leaders handle and comport themselves in French in this debate, going head to head. And that is no small thing. When you get the point of having somebody who is Prime Minister, Mark Carney, he has never been tested in this forum before. The Liberal leadership debates, it was a very friendly forum. He had people helping him out when he made mistakes in French.
You don't think Pierre Poilievre and Mr. Blanchette are going to do that
I highly
tomorrow?
doubt that is going to happen this year.
I don't know. It's a weird election. Anything can happen. But yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, it's Pierre Poilievre's first sort of debate, though, I think he showed in the leadership contest, he's not afraid to go hard at people if he has to. But, he's in an interesting position. We'll get into the strategies and stuff a little bit later, but I do want to focus on another element about this debate, and this is about the Greens, because there's a controversy around the debate, is that the Green Party is participating in this. The Bloc leader says the Greens shouldn't be in the debate because they didn't meet the criteria to participate. Now, parties must meet at least 2 of 3 tests to get a spot on the debate stages. The party must have an MP in the House, elected under the party banner, can't be a floor crosser, and the Greens have that. The party also needs to be at 4% in the national polls. The Greens do not meet that bar. Finally, the party must have candidates endorsed in 90% of the ridings 28 days before the election. And here's where things get tricky. Because my colleagues were asked the Greens how many candidates they had on that deadline day. And they said, we just submitted a list of 340 candidates to Elections Canada this morning. JP Tasker, the reporter on that, followed up saying, and he asked, there's only 227 listed on your website right now. Can you explain the discrepancy? Party advisor replied, workforce capacity. We're inching away and getting the names up as fast as we can. Well, when the official list of candidates came out, the Greens did not have 340 registered candidates, but only 232 candidates, far below that 90% threshold at about 70%. And when asked about the drastically lower number, the party said in a statement, we saw challenges in getting signatures. Many volunteers were bullied in the field, and we've asked Elections Canada to investigate the issue. Some returning officers did not seem prepared for the intake of signatures. We're in the process of looking into this matter now. However, in an interview with Radio-Canada, the Green Party co-leader had a different reason, at least in part, saying in French, it's a strategic decision. We decided not to send candidates to certain ridings, particularly where the Conservatives have a better chance of winning the election than we do. Now, for its part, the Debate Commission says the invitation for a leader to attend the debate is based on the submission of the party before the candidate deadline so that the producers of the debate would have sufficient amount of time to plan the debate. But here we are. Kate, start with you. What do you make of this? I mean, they sent a list of 340 names, and 100 of them are not there. I don't know how many of them are strategic decisions and how many of them are paperwork decisions. If they were slightly below, you could see it, but 100 candidates is a lot.
Yeah, that's a really big discrepancy, and you would think that if they were thinking ahead to the criteria for participating on this stage. They would have mounted an effort before right at the deadline to really make the case for why they should be included. We have a debate commission for a reason. I don't always agree with all of the decisions that they make, like we just talked about in terms of how many debates are appropriate. But if you don't meet the rules and the threshold, then you shouldn't be allowed to participate.
Sherelle, what do you make of this? Like, if this is the way it's going to work, you can just send oh yeah, we got this many, and if there's no consequences for it, it seems like, because I've sent a series of questions to the Greens, like, when did you know? And did you tell the commission? And how many of these did you choose not to run for strategic reasons? Because that's a deliberate choice that could maybe put you below the threshold. What do you make of this one?
Yeah, it does raise a lot of questions, and the fact that they're, is this also raises the question of, does having the two co-leader setup cause some problems? Because why are there two answers to this question? That came up for me. If the debate commission, if they invited them and they don't want to revoke the invitation, then that's on the debate commission. But it should also on the debate commission to say, we have a list of rules, we have a set of criteria, and yes, we've invited you because we wanted everybody to have the opportunity to make their plans. But if you cannot meet this deadline, if you cannot meet this threshold, then what is to stop people from doing exactly that? Submitting a list of names, saying we're going to have this many people running, and then not having that happen. Because to say that you have 100 and something people who had issues, getting in touch with returning officers and submitting signatures, I know that things are.
It's also quite an allegation to make, right? Because it implies like Elections Canada is the problem here, right?
Exactly. That's exactly it. It implies Elections Canada is the issue. It's implying, and I know that there are issues on the ground. It is a difficult environment. There are people around elections. People are always trying to recruit people to work for Elections Canada and get these really important jobs done, but that is still in 100 different locations. That's asking for people to believe a lot.
Michelle, what's the remedy in a situation like this? Is it okay that this happened, or is this the sort of thing that gets a party disqualified?
I have a hard time finding logic that they would still be included in the debate. You look at Poilievre's riding, and there's 70 candidates there. Well,
90.
somehow
There's over 90.
So Elections Canada would, and they do everything they can to make sure that the people who put themselves forward run. And it's not the most pleasant task being able to do all that kind of stuff. And so hats off to all of them. And I think that they put forward their best effort for everybody who's there. So that doesn't hold true to me. The whole two-leader thing is just bizarre. I've never understood that, and how. The potential that one person's going to be in one debate and the other person might be in another debate. But then the question is, why are they there? And, the debate commission, they have the responsibility to make sure that the leaders who are, running national campaigns with a national slate of candidates are heard by Canadians. And so this seems to me to be a big stretch as to why they'd be there.
Françoise, what do you think?
Not much to add to what the guys just said. I'll say in English what I said in French. I think it's unacceptable. The commission should have, I can understand that they will give a certain date that you have to submit, just so that they can start, that the network can start preparing with what they have. But keep at least the possibility of reviewing with Election Canada once the official candidates have been confirmed, because we know it can change. And the problem here is that the date between the two was like a week period. So what is a week? I understand that for the host of the debate, it might impact on the questions and who's going to face who. But I mean, in this day and age of computers and everything, there's a lot of things that can be done. If one person should be mad today, is Maxime Bernier. I'm not a huge fan, but basically he's got people in every ridings. He might not have a seat, but in certain ridings the percentage are. So if our idea is to help democracy, I find it is a joke right now to see the Green. And as for the two leaders in Quebec, we're used to with Quebec Solidaire. But even then, when comes the election time, they decide amongst the two which one will be their actual person running for the position of prime minister. So here it's like, hey, we want the best of every world. Don't have to face the French because I'm not as good en français as, so I'll send Jonathan and I'll take the English one or whatever.
I do think Jonathan was doing both debates.
Yeah, exactly. But still, it gave that impression. And I mean, it's not a joke because there's only one, like you said. So I find the commission will have food for thoughts after this. And to think, I'm sure Mr. Carney is not unhappy though. It's 20% of the time that he will not have to answer because somebody else. But is it good for democracy? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, just looking at the, I just called it the CBC poll tracker. I know this is the snapshot now and not when the decision was made. But Kay, to give you the last word on this, I mean, the Greens do have 2 MPs, right, in Mike Morris and in Elizabeth May, but they're at 2%. In the polls, and they are not running a full slate of candidates. They've actually written letters calling for strategic coordination with the various so-called progressive parties. Max Bernier, who does not have a seat in the House, they're at 1.6%. Like there's a 0.4 percentage point gap, and if they're out, it seems the Greens should be out. I mean, I know people get annoyed about the Bloc, but you know they have like 30 seats in the House, and they're over 5% nationally. I mean, it seems like this is something else about this that is going to need to be reviewed.
Yeah, it does not make sense to apply one set of criteria to the Greens and another set of criteria to the PPC. In fact, it really underscores and amplifies Maxime Bernier's concerns about how the odds have always been stacked against him. And so the safest thing that the Commission could have done is say, the rules are the rules, everyone knew the rules in advance, and we are applying them equally, and they've opted not to do that.
Yeah, this is an interesting, it's the same set of standards applied, it's just whether they're applied equally or not. The Greens had to clear one hurdle, not two. Okay, we're going to pause this for a second because we're going to talk about a moment during the White House briefings today that we think is probably going to bring Trump's annexation threats back to the top of Canadians' minds. Yesterday, the CBC's Katie Simpson, you know her, she said on the show that she was seeking more clarity from the U.S. administration on potential changes to its auto tariffs. And today, she put her question right to the White House press secretary, plus an additional question about Trump's rhetoric on Canada. And as she does almost every day these days, Katie Simpson joins us now from Washington with some answers. All right, Katie, you were able to ask the press secretary a question. I want to show this. That's Katie Simpson right there. Just so we can zoom in on this. That's Katie right there in the White House briefing room asking the question. You were able to ask the press secretary two today. What did you learn from all of this?
Yeah, I can't see the photo that you put up there, but those press briefing rooms are pretty packed. And so it's pretty competitive to try to get a question. And so, because everyone, just imagine it, it's a room full of reporters that are, reporting back to, dozens and dozens of journalists, news agencies all around the world. And today I happened to get a couple of questions in. The first question I wanted to ask about was tariffs, because of course, the Canadian economy relies so heavily on trade with the United States. And so I asked about that first. And then sort of a question that has sort of been nagging at Canadians. Some Canadians think, why would I ask a question about annexation when Donald Trump hasn't talked about it? But that's exactly what I wanted to know was why hasn't he talked about it? Has something changed? Anyway, have a listen. Tariffs first, Canada second. Annexation second. Have a listen.
Yesterday, in the Oval Office, President Trump suggested that there could be some help for automakers. I'm wondering what that looks like. Is it tariff relief on the 25% tariffs that are in place right now, or the new tariffs that are coming up in May on auto parts? And a second on Canada, if I may. President Trump's tone when it comes to Canada-U.S. relations, Canadians have noticed it's shifted a bit in the past few weeks. Ever since the election campaign started, he stopped talking about Canada becoming the 51st state, at least publicly. I'm wondering if that's on purpose and why.
I would reject the president's position on Canada has shifted. Perhaps he just hasn't been asked about Canada by questions from this group in the Oval Office, but they see him almost every day. But the president still maintains his position on Canada. The United States has been subsidizing Canada's national defense, and he believes that Canadians would benefit greatly from becoming the 51st state of the United States of America. As for autos and auto parts, I don't have anything to read out for you there, but I think the point the president was making is flexibility, and he has flexibility when it comes to negotiations and talks, but ultimately his goal in his fair trade deals that he is pursuing with many countries around the world is to put the American worker first. And we had automakers and auto workers here at the White House on Liberation Day who believe in this president and his negotiating ability to put them first and to bring those jobs back to the United States of America. And the president's been very clear about that in his conversations with the automakers as well.
So Trump had said in the Oval Office on Monday that he was looking at getting some help to car makers because they need a little bit more time. It was unclear whether he meant that there could be some sort of pause for the tariffs on the auto sector that are in place right now, or whether it would be related to the upcoming tariffs on auto parts, foreign auto parts that are supposed to take effect in May. Any sort of changes or pause or anything could have significant impact on Canadian jobs, Canadian auto plants, that kind of thing. So in terms of what the president said on Monday, there's no further explanation or anything new from the president on that. And then when it comes to, what Donald Trump has said many times in the past, he sort of eased off on that rhetoric, and I wanted to know why. Is it on purpose? Has he changed his mind? Was he irked by Justin Trudeau and only said it to get under Justin Trudeau's skin, or is there something different going on here? So that's why I wanted to know why. Anyway, so that she says that his position is not changed in this moment.
Okay, that's going to be a thunderbolt into this campaign, Katie. But when it comes to the broader trade war, because it changes on the regular, what is the White House saying today?
The White House had a direct message for Beijing today saying the ball is in China's court, essentially saying it's going to be up to Beijing to reach out at this point, and that Caroline Leavitt saying the point is that, China needs to make a deal with the United States. The United States doesn't need to make a deal with China. Remember, China is the biggest target of Donald Trump's trade war. For years, it has been criticized for its trading practices. It is an American adversary. And remember, Canadians who live in the world of trade, I think of canola, do know that they can face extreme challenges when trying to deal with China in sort of a consistent way. It can be very difficult because there are times when China doesn't necessarily play by the rules that the rest of the world does, particularly when it comes to trade. We can talk about other things as well, but we're just talking about trade in this conversation right here. In terms of China's response, Xi Jinping is on the second day of his multi-country tour. He's trying to get out there, meeting with leaders in Malaysia today to try and present China and Beijing as a stable, reliable trading partner at a time when the United States is threatening tariffs and imposing tariffs on nearly all of its trading partners. But again, that could be a difficult task depending on how China is presenting itself, given its history of some concerns around its trading practices. Right. But that is what the Chinese president is up to. He's got one more stop on this tour as he tries to sort of shore up some regional alliances and sort of present China as a stable, reliable trading partner, something that the United States would deeply criticize.
Okay, Katie, great stuff today. Thanks so much to CBC's Katie Simpson live in Washington. Well, Honda confirmed today it has no current plans to move any auto manufacturing out of Canada. That was after a report from Japanese media that the company was considering a relocation. The Liberal, Conservative, and NDP leaders were all in Montreal today speaking about that threat.
The U.S., President Trump's tariffs are attacking our auto industry. This is one of the crown jewels of North American manufacturing.
President Trump deserves nothing but condemnation for the unfair targeting of Canada. There's nobody who's going to be able to control President Trump, as Mr. Carney is learning.
We know that many sectors are being impacted, so it really highlights how we need to really fight back and get these tariffs removed.
Okay, I'm back at the big table with the power panel. Michelle, this is quite the thunderbolt into the campaign, as I said with Katie. I think that right there from the White House lectern in the briefing room, the 51st state is still what he wants to do.
Yeah, and it's just a reminder that, even though he's opening up war with other countries, it doesn't mean that he's taken his eye off of Canada. He hasn't let up on the auto tariffs. Hopefully, he is actually feeling the pressure and he's going to maybe release that a little bit, but that doesn't mean anything for steel. He's got another front apparently on pharmaceuticals and chips that he wants to open up in the next little while. And I'm sure Greenland's in the same position as Canada. Like, he has his eyes on us. He thinks our border is arbitrary, and he is someone that we are going to have to be facing down. He looms large over this election campaign. He looms large over our future. And, it makes what the vote is on the 28th so much more important. We have to be able to stand up to him. We have to be able to carve our own path economically. And we have to make our decision based on who's the best to lead us through that.
Françoise, thankfully, the Honda report either is premature or imprecise, but you can see the anxiety and the nerves of anything to do with the auto sector right now. I mean, the 1-2 punch of that, followed by Trump getting back on his commentary about annexation, or at least his spokesperson doing that.
Well, I think it's a reminder to all of us that even if for the last 48 hours we didn't say the word Trump too loudly, doesn't mean that he's absent, that everything is settled and everything is good and back to normal. It will never be normal at all. So that was a good reminder today with what happened. And you had Premier Doug Ford coming out and saying, whoa, that's not what is being said. At the same time, we cannot be naive and think that there's nothing brewing somewhere, because we've got a version from Honda Canada, but you also have Honda. And the mothership seems to say, well, they are reviewing a few things, because they have to think, how do we deal with the states and so on and so forth. We had Donald Trump yesterday reversing a few things and thinking out loud like only him can do. So I wouldn't say so well, but so incredibly weird way, which brings back people to, we don't exactly know how to dance. So it just has to have the impact of saying, until you sign, and even a signature from Donald Trump, I would have some worries, but until we sign a new deal between Canada and the US and hopefully Mexico at the same time, I think we're going to dance that way. And in this election, it brings back the headline. Who do you think is more apt to deal and navigate in the next 2-3 years with that situation?
Cheryl, what do you think this does? I mean, we're into the stretch run here with the debates coming tomorrow at 6 p.m. for the French one, and still hopefully at 7 on Thursday. But to have this sort of re-injecting itself this way.
Yeah, I do think it is a reminder, and it does kind of entrench everybody in their position. I don't know if the parties, the political leaders, everybody who's running have taken their eyes off of that prize, so to speak, because they know that if they want to grasp people's attention, if they want to really fire up Canadians in the sense with that sense of nationalism, then Donald Trump is the perfect foil for that. So the fact that, tariffs are ongoing, the fact that Donald Trump, he may have not have been using that specific, terminology and vocabulary about the 51st state in the last, couple of weeks, but he hasn't not been talking about Canada. Even during, in the garden on his, Liberation Day at the beginning of the month, he still unprompted, even though Canada wasn't on the list for these so-called reciprocal tariffs, he was still talking about, how nasty and terrible Canada is. So it's not something that I think anybody on the political front has forgotten about, but I do think it does, as François said, just kind of reiterate and entrench for people. Who are you looking for? Who is supposed to be the best leader? And it helps. I think it helps, whether it's Mark Carney, whether it's Pierre Poilievre, it helps them, frame their arguments about, okay, Donald Trump is still talking about Canada in this way, so therefore Mark Carney didn't get the job done.
What do you think, Kate? I mean, I don't know if this is what the Conservatives wanted to hear today from the White House, right? They're trying to focus it back on the issues that they want to campaign on, and this happens.
But there's actually political consensus right now that Canada will not be the 51st state.
Sure, 100%.
Point final,
100%.
all of the leaders have been super clear on that. I think both Carney and Poilievre shot that down really fast. So I think to Cheryl's point, and François' point, it's a reminder. It will entrench for people something that's already known. It's been lingering out there for some time. So we're going to continue to operate in chaos. It is a feature. It is not a bug of this administration. So what are we going to do to meet that chaos as a country? What are we going to do from a policy perspective to make sure that we're self-reliant and that we can be strong? I noticed that the press secretary to Mr. Trump talked about defense spending. There has been some discussion about that from some on the campaign, but that call out of that specifically I thought was interesting today. So I think we have these threats. That's not going to change. It's not going to change until we have a bilateral agreement in place, I think. I don't know why he would remove that chit. So we need to get back to how Canada is going to meet these threats. Today, news about housing starts being down, news about food inflation being up. Like, we have serious problems as a country that we need to prepare, that we need to remedy in order to meet that threat that's being posed by the U.S. And so there needs to be a conversation that includes all of these things, not just psychoanalyzing somebody who should be spending a lot of time lying flat on a back in a therapist chair.
Wait, look, I'm not asking anyone to psychoanalyze the president, but every time he becomes sort of a focal point, it seems to supercharge the Liberals. You know what I mean? Like, this has been that it allows Mr. Carney to, campaign as the prime minister. He can sometimes go back, call a cabinet meeting, these sorts of things. I mean,
and we'll see if he pauses his campaign for a fourth time to weigh the threat that was announced today from the president. But listen, I think that there is a bit of an incumbent advantage there to the prime minister in terms of how he would deal with that, and he can articulate Canada's response in the way that somebody challenging for that seat cannot. But I do think that where the real challenge is and the real debate is on how Canada is going to prepare and whether or not Canadians want to hand another 4 years to the group that was responsible for the last 10.
How do you see it playing, Michelle? I mean, it's. It is the issue, when the ballot question is about dealing with Trump, the Liberals feel it is to their benefit.
Well, I think that it's clear that that is the ballot question. And I don't know that Canadians needed reminding, to be honest. Last week, even though he wasn't mentioning Canada, anyone who looked at their RRSPs or, their RESPs or looked at, how they were trying to save for their first home, sure felt it when, Trump's tariffs went wild and the markets went insane. Equally, when he backed off, they saw that it kind of came back again. So I think Canadians are very well aware of the chaos that man is having on our livelihoods, on the cost of living here, and on our future. And so I don't think that was done for any favor, but certainly maybe it did put it into sharper focus of what the issue of the day is, and probably what Canadians are talking about around the water cooler. But I don't know that it made the Liberals' day all that much better, because let's face it, that threat is a real threat for Canada, and I don't think anyone takes any comfort from that.
Okay, go ahead.
I just want to add, what makes this election so weird and fascinating at the same time is that everything we said is right. But tomorrow we've got a debate en français, and then the next day in English. Not one party has presented a costed platform. Usually that's how it used to work. And then you had leaders asking, hey, this line. I still remember Prime Minister Trudeau looking at O'Toole and saying, sorry, but that's not what you're saying on page 49. I don't remember what they were talking about. But it was a big moment in a campaign. Now it's more a question of just personality. We don't exactly know how we are going to go and get out of that mess, what type of deal we're looking for. So we have to make a leap of faith in a personality, whoever it is. Du jamais vu. And since I followed politics, I've never seen that before. It's amazing.
I think that was about guns last time, wasn't it? Because I remember there was an issue, the Conservatives put out their campaign. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kate. Day one, essentially, the O'Toole in the tight T-shirt platform came out on day one, and then they had to do some amendments to it, right? It was a navy blue. It was a conservative blue. Come on now. But I don't remember. Like Andrew Scheer's cost of platform coming out until near the end of the 2019 campaign. Just thinking of that. That's just I covered both of those. That's why I remember.
They released a pretty comprehensive environmental platform first.
Yeah.
To try and get ahead of a lot of the conversation at that point around climate change. But yeah, I think honestly, strategically, release your platform after the debate, right? To avoid the 2021 incident of nitpicking things in the platform and then calling attention to it on the debate stage. I think there is a strategic reason why none of the major parties are choosing to do that at this point.
Well, but also that's not what this campaign's about, right?
But that was my point. Exactly.
It should be absolutely.
It's not about
You
numbers.
might want it to be, but that existential question is what Canadians care about, and that's what they're going to be focused on. They want the government, whoever is in power, to be spending the money to help transition whatever happens to we have a whole bunch of workers who lose their jobs. You know, they want businesses to be supported. We don't know what chaos is still to come with Trump, but we need somebody who's in charge who actually understands the support that Canadians and
But we do
Canadian
need
businesses will
we need a prime minister and a team for 4 years, not the next 6 months, which is likely when on an accelerated time frame that we will have a renegotiated bilateral agreement. Like there is a lot more going on in Canada than just
we have a renegotiated bilateral agreement with Donald Trump, and he's thrown that aside and torn it apart. Do you think any piece of paper is going to keep that man honest with respect to any kind of negotiation around the world?
Yeah,
I don't believe it.
I asked myself that question, but
maybe
he's got the excuse of Joe Biden. So he can say, I signed the greatest deal on earth in 2018. And then came Joe Biden. People exploited us, went through, not my fault, all their fault. Canada's bad, the world is bad, and now let's move on to a new. The minute you will sign something, he will live with this, because I do believe he's going to be a man of his word on his last word.
Oh, we'll see. I mean, 90-day pause, will it last 90 hours? Who knows, right? Like, we'll see. But Cheryl, just give you the last word on this. Like, a cost of platform, we all like to see it, to see the plan and how it all stacks up. I don't know how any party does anything with a credible financial projection right now. And that's not because of them, it's because of Donald Trump, right? Like, you don't know where trade is going to go, you don't know where employment's going to go, and what you think is a real solid balance of revenues and cuts, and it might not last the day, depending on what he does.
Right, whether it's a platform, whether it's any government's budget. I mean, we saw what happened with the Trudeau Liberals trying to put together a fall economic statement, and how that kind of devolved even before the day of, but even just them trying to pull it all together to come up with measures and things to put into that to respond to an incoming, at that point, president. So yes, any party, it's important to have the numbers and see what kind of math they're trying to put forward. You know, if it's liberal math, there's conservative math, there's NDP math. But any of that could easily have a hole blown in it in, you know, the next day.
Okay. I want to move on to the next topic because CBC News has confirmed reports that were first in other media that show that some Conservative MPs have personal investments in Brookfield-related companies. Brookfield Assets Management is, of course, the company that Liberal leader Mark Carney previously chaired, a role Conservatives have repeatedly attacked Carney over. Well, it turns out 6 Conservative MPs have disclosed that they hold stock in Brookfield or its subsidiaries, and that includes Melissa Lantsman, who as of 2024 held stocks in one of Brookfield's investment funds based in Bermuda. Lantsman, who is the deputy leader, has accused Carney and Brookfield of dodging taxes using those types of funds. So let's pick up there. Kate, I'm going to come to you first. So I'm sure you expected that. There's a tweet Melissa Lantsman put out on March 26, where she said, Mark Carney dodged Canadian taxes using offshore tax havens while running Brookfield. Her own disclosures has her and her spouse investing in these very funds. Square this for me, if you can.
Yeah. Listen, I think there is a big difference between holding investments and being the chair of the company at the time making use of these tax havens. That's not an apples-to-apples comparison, in my view. But I would say that it does highlight the importance of financial disclosure of elected officials. I would be a fan of more transparency there. Pardon me, and Conservatives have called for that. And for me, this really underscores why Mr. Carney is not releasing his financial disclosures. If we're going to ask that of members of Parliament, and I think we should, if we're going to ask that of members of Parliament, should it not be incumbent on the potential Prime Minister of Canada to do the same, somebody who has had a far greater role in Brookfield's management than somebody who owns stock in the company?
But if it's unethical for Brookfield to set up these funds, which has been the Conservative argument, why is it ethical for the Conservative deputy leader and other members of caucus to invest in them?
Yeah, it's a fair point. I think that everybody needs to take a pretty good look at their finances and see exactly what is used in terms of, you know, the practices and, the practices of these investment funds, a lot of whom make use of these, but I think it is unethical. And so if you are an elected member of Parliament, you should make sure that your investments and your stocks are with organizations that are paying their fair share of tax in Canada. Again, I think this is not an apples to apples thing. Somebody who holds stock is not the same as the man who was responsible for moving the headquarters south of the border or playing a very key role in the investment systems of these companies and the investment setup. So I think that there's not an apples to apples comparison, but more transparency is good. And I think that the point really should be, where's that transparency from Mr. Carney?
Well, if I can just go back. Those are allegations that you're suggesting in terms of the taxes. So let's just be clear on that. There's no suggestion that everybody isn't paying their fair share of taxes. And I suspect that Melissa Landsman is actually paying her fair share of taxes on her investments for Brookfield.
So just to be clear, I'm saying that the company is responsible for is making use of tax havens.
They are making use of the taxes that Melissa Landsman and Pierre Poilievre, I believe, too.
Well, no, Pierre Poilievre is in a group like a
he trusts Brookfield.
Vanguard fund.
He trusts Brookfield with other parts of it.
No, but he bought a fund. He bought units in a fund that broadly holds a bunch of Canadian companies, of which Brookfield is a part.
Okay.
But
so
these are direct share purchases that Landsman and Scott Reed and Scott Davidson and others have made.
Exactly. Okay, fair enough. But more to the point, it seems that all of these MPs, including the leadership of the Conservative Party, actually trust the company that Mark Carney was the chair of to manage their money. And so I think that that's, if anything, an endorsement of his economic prowess. And so I would be, I would be a little chagrined if if it came back on me about what my actual holdings were, and it turns out to be with that company, that big company that I'm calling someone incapable of dealing with the economy of Canada. So I do appreciate that huge irony, and I'm sure that they are very embarrassed about being found out with that.
I don't know if they need to be embarrassed about anything. Again, I think the principle here, and something that Poilievre has committed to, is more transparency around these disclosures.
Yeah, I'm sure he's going to be talking about that in all of the press statements and all of the questions
He's still refusing to make those disclosures.
No, that's not true in any way.
He hasn't disclosed his real estate holdings?
No, that is not true in any way. He has made every disclosure that was necessary of him.
That was necessary. That was necessary of him, only by the book, not what's actually morally right.
Okay, well, that's a big statement. Morally right?
It should not be for somebody who wants to be the Prime Minister of Canada.
Okay, so just for the audience, he has divested his assets. There's two ways you can divest assets. Sell them off or put them in a blind trust, right? And when you're a public office holder in Canada, he has gone the blind trust route. The only assets Mr. Carney says he has direct control over are cash, his primary residence, a house here in Ottawa, and a cottage. That's what he says right now. Now, I know the allegation has been that there are maybe stock options and other things in Brookfield and all of these things that are showing up on the disclosure list of his opponents in this election. But Françoise, what I wonder is we've to this point litigated quite a bit about Carney disclosure and whether that needs to be changed. And he's complied with the law. And if people want to change the law, that's the thing. But this reminds me, I have a good friend back in St. John's named David McCarthy. He used to tell me that when you find yourself taking the moral high ground in an argument, you should throw yourself off because you probably don't belong there. And this is what I thought of today, that you're criticizing the actions of a company that you are investing in for your own personal financial gain while attacking it for political gain. I just feel like this becomes a real problem in the debates the next couple of nights if the Conservatives choose to go that route.
Definitely, it gives an out. I mean, they all, in French we say, beware, if you spit in the air, it might fall right on your nose. Basically, that's the expression en français. It sounds better.
It's more lyrical in the original.
French, but I did an automatic translation. And that's always the danger. I mean, when somebody takes that high moral ground and point the finger, gardez-vous une petite gêne. Just be a bit, and that may be the campaign, the problem of the Conservative campaign. They should have asked first, anybody's got anything in Brookfield? Please, if you're not sure, because sometimes you don't know, you don't follow this every day, and I'm suspecting that maybe she didn't know. I used to have funds before I transferred them, and it's like, I never check. I trusted my banker to do these things.
Just on that, these are direct purchases into the funds, and it's Brookfield Renewables, so it's a net zero
okay, well
one.
Then,
I looked it up online, and it says it is a Bermuda-based limited partnership. It's right there in the disclosure. So,
well, more bees person to shut up and say, you know what, I'll pass my turn on this one, take somebody else to do the attack dog thing there. At the same time, I think it's a reflection of us all, because in Quebec we have some retirement funds. La Caisse de dépôt et de placement are in Brookfield. Yeah. So I think when you're reduced to make those type of accusation, to try to bring down somebody, unless they are really fraudulent, committed a crime of some. If we're all anti-tax haven and so on, let's change the damn laws and stop just talking and saying this and that. Make it your first piece of legislation when you come back, and make sure that you're helping the companies to be proactive and fighting on the same ground as other corporations outside Canada, because there's all type of logic. I find this whole debate is just deterring the real problems that are in front of Canadians right now. But it's ironic when you have the person who points the finger and it comes right back at them. I mean, take a break, Melissa.
Sherelle, is this a spit in the air and it lands on your nose kind of moment, to butcher it in English? You know?
I mean, it might be, and it's so common in politics, and you can think of so many examples of this exact type of thing. You think back, you don't have to go too far back to think about the Liberal housing policy that Conservative MPs were writing letters wanting the funding for their own communities, while at the same time, charging against the program in the House of Commons. And then I was thinking about, the whole, with the Trudeau and the whole Aga Khan Island thing, and, Rona Ambrose, as interim leader for the Conservatives at the time, she was, very quickly on this, but then she had to pull it right back because it was discovered, well, she was also spending her, her Christmas vacation on a yacht owned by somebody very, very wealthy. So it's, as Francois says, this is kind of what people don't like about politics. And everybody kind of says we want to see adults in the room. We want to see people be role models and leaders if they are going to be in these positions. And maybe that's, sounds a little too Pollyanna, but I do think that this is what turns people off. Yeah. And that is entirely the reason that we have these toxic political situations. People don't want to get involved because they are seeing this happen and they're going, well, I can't possibly make a mistake. I can't possibly, change my mind. I can't possibly do this, that, and the other, simply because they know they're going to be attacked for something that somebody else is probably doing at the same time.
So Kate, on that, when we reached out to the Conservatives, they came back with, this shows the value of disclosure, right? Which is the point you're making earlier. But the criticism has been these funds are unethical because they're offshore. So I need to get back to this. Why is it unethical to set it up, but not unethical to invest in it? This is what I'm really struggling to square. And I didn't set this standard. I'm not creating a false standard. This is a standard that was set as a criticism of Mr. Carney that would suggest, because it's Melissa Lantzman, her spouse, Scott Reed, Scott Davidson, Stephen Ellis, Greg McLean, Cheryl Gallant, Marty Morantz, Ron Liebert's spouse, Kelly McCauley, but got rid of his in 2020. It's more than a few of them. And Mr. Poilievre, when he brought his investments back to a Canadian fund, I mean, you can't buy into a Canadian fund without buying into Brookfield. It's that big of a company in the Canadian economy. But why is this okay and not that?
Yeah, I think if you're going to make a commitment around tax havens and bringing more transparency to this, you have to be prepared to walk the walk yourselves. So that should have been done prior to that promise is what I would observe, so that situations like this are more easily navigated. But there's one party that is proposing to close this loophole. I think it has the support of the NDP. I think it has the support of the Bloc. It does not have the support of the Liberals. And there's a good question as to why.
Well, Michelle, why? Because I looked for examples of Mr. Poilievre talking about tax havens prior to this. And the only other time I could find it was when Mr. Bronfman, who's in charge of fundraising for the Liberals, his personal trust or family trust was also in a tax haven. So it became an attack point rather than, because the New Democrats are always talking about this. This is core principle for them, right? They have been talking about tax reform and cracking down on tax avoidance for a while. I don't get the sense Mr. Carney feels these are immoral options for corporations because he's enthusiastically used them and defended them as a way of creating value for shareholders and investors. What do you think happens with this in a Carney government should he win?
Well, I think that without question, he has been very clear that companies and Canadians should pay their fair share of taxes. And, you know, corporations have to be able to compete and do business and try and get returns for, you know, whether it's the Quebec pension fund or the Canadian pension fund or whoever their investors are. That's part of the role of a company, is to do the best by investors. And the role of government is to try and make sure that everybody is paying a fair share of taxes. And so, you know, Mr. Poilievre has decided that this is a new horse to ride because he thought it was convenient. You know, so he's picked up the reins for a second time. And now is probably going to drop them again because he's been found to have a number of caucus members who have actually bought into those very same funds that he's so stridently against for the moment. So, you know, I think that it's not like they have a history of being on this issue all the time. I'm sure it would be something that everyone will look at in terms of are there loopholes to close, or is that just sometimes how some global businesses are conducting themselves. You know, I think it's something that I remember my days at finance that you always looked at and always tried to tighten up, but it's not quite always so simple when you get into the kind of governmentese.
So, Francoise, just like in the context of this campaign, this has become a real issue because it is seen as a potential point of vulnerability to knock down the front runner. It seems that's what's driven it so much, and why, you know, the conduct of Brookfield and its organization of its corporate entities has been a focal point. I mean, do you get the sense that this is a burning issue in this campaign? Do you get the sense that whoever wins this needs to deal with these things? Because I think if you start messing around with this stuff, you're going to find a lot of corporate Canada is going to say, whoa, wait a minute, right? Because the web of this is more complicated than just Mark Carney and Brookfield.
I mean, it's a great principle, but it's not. If it had been easy, it would have been fixed a long time ago. I mean, since I started in politics in 2004, we've been talking about that. Paul Martin at the time had placed his things in the hands of his kids. We had to defend that over and over, even if the type of business, they all function that way. But when people want to play politics, and I so agree with you, Cheryl, that's what people hate. If it had been simple, it would have been fixed. It's not that simple.
Yeah.
If they commit to do something about it, we can't just be Canada doing it. It has to be elsewhere, because otherwise our corporations will not be able to compete. So between the position of the NDP is you have to be cleaner than, and I agree with that, but it's not practical most of the time. There's a middle line, and if everybody can agree, I love the platform that Poilievre presented on tax haven. It's clear, it's a step in the right direction. I don't think the Liberals should push away from it, and I'm not sure they would either, but it's not a priority at this point.
Okay, I got to quickly get something in here, because we spoke earlier this hour about the questions facing the Green Party ahead of tomorrow's first debate, and some critics say its co-leader shouldn't participate because the party doesn't appear to meet 2 of the 3 criteria required. Well, the CBC just spoke to that co-leader, Jonathan Pedno. He says they have fewer candidates than expected because of several challenges. Have a listen to what he said.
We had people being called names, told that they shouldn't be running Green candidates in those ridings, that it's only Liberal or Conservative, there's no place for the Greens. Look, I don't think that's representative of everyone, but within a short election such as this one, where you have a fairly limited amount of time to go and gather those signatures, when we have volunteers, people who may have jobs and other situations in their personal lives, it demands a lot of time, especially in more rural ridings, to go and collect those signatures. We don't have the kind of money that the Liberals or the NDP, for example, have to pay people to go and collect those signatures for their candidates.
It's the first time we hear NDP and money, but...
Yeah, pinch yourself, Francoise.
Cheryl, what do you make of that? I'm not sure that answers the questions, right? Like, you told the commission, yeah, we got 343, and they don't for a bunch of reasons there.
Yeah, if you've identified the people who are willing to run, theoretically, based on this list that they presented to the commission, then those people should have been, out there pounding the pavement. Yeah, it's hard. He's right. It is difficult. But yet we still manage to get multiple parties across the country being able to field multiple candidates. This election, yes, it's a snap election, but it wasn't a surprise. So
no, we knew this was an election year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And if you are truly a national party, and look, I had Jonathan Pedno sat where Kate is sitting, and Elizabeth May where Michelle Cadere is sitting last week, and Sherelle, they said to me, you know, democracy is better when there's more Greens involved. And okay, that's your pitch, but this is a democratic process with a threshold to clear, and they didn't clear it, and the explanation isn't solid, it seems.
No, and it did kind of come across to me, what I just heard is, well, we tried and it was hard and we didn't do it. And people should, you know, kind of feel sorry for us. It's kind of what the vibe I was getting. That's not what he said, but that's kind of the vibe he was getting. And it's like, well, if you can't clear that bar, then you still haven't really demonstrated or proven why you should be on the national stage. Yes, you're saying, you know, politics are better when the Greens are involved, but if you're not involved in all those ridings the way that you're supposed to be in order to be on that stage, then maybe you should take the thing and step aside.
Yeah, it just seems for the last couple of years, everything we hear about the Greens is internal restructuring and changing of constitutions and fighting over leadership structure and leadership, and rather than outbuilding an actual
Elizabeth May needs to find a way to make herself the leader for a fourth time.
We'll see about that.
No,
but look,
but honestly, I'm actually now annoyed having heard that response.
Yes.
Because for a long time, the Green Party takes up a ton of space on the debate stage, and if they're not meeting the operational criteria to participate, if they're not fielding candidates because it's hard, which is the very diplomatic way that he put it, I think there was perhaps not sufficient interest in fielding candidates in all these ridings. Why are they on the stage? Like, it does not make sense.
Yeah, and we'll see. I mean, how that is dealt with tomorrow by the moderators and by the other candidates. Just quickly, more important in this campaign, Michelle, the French debate or the English debate? Because I'm of the view of the French debate. The Liberals have a floor in Quebec. I don't think they can drop too dramatically there, but in the English debate, Mr. Poilievre really needs to sort of raise his ceiling, especially in Ontario. Which one do you think is, or is it the totality of it all?
No, I think it's the English debate. I think that there's going to be a lot of pressure on both Mr. Carney and Mr. Poilievre in terms of how they comport themselves. You know, is Mr. Carney going to be defensive, or is he going to be able to kind of take all those jabs? And is Mr. Poilievre going to be nasty? And is he going to, you know, kind of hate on the Liberals more than he hates on Trudeau? So very important.
Françoise, quick 20 seconds on this.
I think they're both important. In French, we've been talking about Mr. Carney's French. How will he be able to compose himself in a debate situation that will be far different than what he lived as at the leadership? So he can disappoint. I mean, maybe he can disappoint a bit, but not too much, because you never know what Quebec would do in that case.
Sherelle?
I did see a couple of weeks ago, I did see some polling word out of Quebec saying the Francophones didn't actually think that Mark Carney's French was that bad, or they didn't think it was going to hurt him to a big degree. So because of that, then I would say the English debate, for the reason that have already been said, is, you know, Pierre Poilievre, he needs to not only, he's already entrenched his base, but can he broaden it?
Yeah.
And that is, I think, what people are looking for.
Yeah, Paul Wells, Kate said on the show a couple of weeks ago that Quebecers have decided that Mark Carney's French is perfectly good to negotiate with Donald Trump. So I'm sure that's true. But your thoughts on which of these two contests might matter the most in the ultimate outcome?
I do think there's more at stake in the English language debate. It seems to me like Quebecers' views are firming up in a big way, and that the lack of French prowess is perhaps not the issue that maybe we thought it could be at the beginning of this campaign for Quebec voters. It's a huge opportunity for Mr. Poilievre to grow. It's also an opportunity for Mr. Singh to grow. Yeah. And I think the way that he can do that is by taking some real swipes at the progressive bona fides of Mr. Carney, tax havens being a perfectly good example of that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying French is more important than
I get you.
No, we know you would not.
If he doesn't perform there and then he's got a bad one in English, he'll compound
the compounding effect. No, you're right. I was just saying, I'm talking about strictly for first place. So Mr. Blanchet, he's got a lot at stake tomorrow night.
Oh, you raised the bar.
He needs a big night. Okay, we got to leave it there. It's great to have you all here in person. It's good to have everyone around the big table. Françoise Beauvin, Sherelle Evelyn, Kate Harrison, and Michelle Cadere. CBC News will bring you live coverage of the federal leaders debate. The French debate, I'm surprised to learn, will happen tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern Time instead of 8. You can watch that with simultaneous translation wherever you watch CBC News. And the English language debate, it's on Thursday. We think it's still at 7 p.m. Eastern. Who knows with this election? Power and Politics will have a special pre-debate coverage both days, live from Montreal. There's still lots more to come here on Power and Politics on this edition of the show. First, we'll take a deep dive into battleground Ontario to see how the race is shaping up there. And all the party leaders are in Quebec ahead of tomorrow's French language debate. We'll take you through their policy announcements. Plus, the Power Ranks panel is here to talk about the key moments on the campaign trail today. With 2 weeks to go until the election, CBC's poll tracker shows a steady lead for the Liberals nationally and widening margins in battleground Ontario, which has 122 seats up for grabs. The Liberals are leading the polls in the province with 49.2% support, while the Conservatives are 10 points back at 38.4%. The NDP all the way down to 8.1%, and the Greens at just 2.2%. My next panel of guests have been following the race closely in Ontario. Rob Benzie is the Queen's Park Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star. Sabrina Nanji is the founder of the Queen's Park Observer. And Laura Stone is a reporter for the Globe and Mail's Queen's Park Bureau. Gang, good to see you all. It's good to have you here. Laura, let's start with you. The polls suggest 6-point Liberal lead nationally, marginally tighter than previous weeks, but still a double-digit gap in Ontario. How do you see the biggest province going with the debate coming up this week? Where do things stand?
Well, I think that the debate stakes are extremely high, right? Because the battleground, particularly in the Greater Toronto Area, is key to whoever forms government. And we've seen in the past several elections, the Conservatives have been unable to break through in the Greater Toronto Area, in the suburbs of Toronto, where I live. It's Karina Gould's riding, a Liberal, former Liberal cabinet minister. This is someone who a couple months ago was dead in the water when Justin Trudeau was leader, right? Everyone was anticipating that Karina Gould would not be able to win her riding, similarly to other MPs in the Greater Toronto Area. Now they've seen new life, and we've seen somewhat of a resurgence under Mark Carney's Liberals. So these issues of, affordability, housing prices, crime, these are all big deals in these areas, but are Trump's tariffs trumping this and leading to another Liberal sweep? And so I think that's why the debate and how Mr. Carney and Mr. Poilievre engage with each other, defend each other, make their pitches to Ontario voters will be extremely important this week.
So, Sabrina, I'm wondering, with what was said at the White House podium today, what Donald Trump has been saying, are Donald Trump and Doug Ford working together to put the boots to Pierre Poilievre? Because it seems like they keep finding ways to interject into this campaign in a way that doesn't help the Conservatives.
Yeah, and we saw like kind of the opposite happen provincially, right? Like every time Donald Trump was in the headlines, that really worked for Doug Ford during the provincial campaign. We heard him talk about Trump, tariffs, even today with the throne speech, setting the tone for the next 4 years. It's going to be all about this economic uncertainty. And to Laura's point, that is top of mind for a lot of people in the province right now. And the more that is front and center, I think the harder it's going to be for Pierre Poilievre to break through in some of those key areas, like Laura mentioned, the 905. I'm also thinking of like beyond the outskirts of the GTA, but it's virtually impossible to form a government federally without dominating in Ontario. You said there's 122 seats up for grabs. That's a big chunk of them, and so I do think that we might see the campaigns matter, the debate change some minds, and there's still some time to change tact here. But yeah, I think they've really got to make up the ground here. And I think, highlighting some of their stronger candidates who could be potential cabinet ministers down the line is key here. You've got Melissa Lantsman and Thornhill, Karen Stintz, Eglinton Lawrence. Like, I think sort of showcasing the candidates is going to be should be part of the strategy too.
Okay, look, I want to talk a little bit about the fracture in Ontario with the Conservatives. And Benzie, you were here last time we played this clip. This is Doug Ford being asked about the frequent criticism that Corey Teneycke, his campaign manager, has launched against essentially Jenny Byrne, who is Pierre Poilievre's campaign manager, on the podcast Curse of Politics and at other places. Here's what the Premier said yesterday.
He's tough as nails, but he's the best campaign manager in the country. And to be very frank, if Corey was running that campaign, I don't think Mr. Poilievre would be in the position he's in right now. But it's still a lot of time left. And we still have debates. At the end of the day, the people will decide which way they want this country to move forward. But sometimes the truth hurts.
Benzie, since that, all of these allegations, Doug Ford's not a real conservative. We've seen conservatives who are close to Byrne posting the private phone numbers and emails of members of the Ontario Conservative Party, encouraging people to basically voice their displeasure. This is not a good thing for them this close to voting day.
No, it's not a good thing for them this close to voting day. And David, Mr. Ford is a conservative. He's the most powerful elected conservative in the country, but he's a progressive conservative, not necessarily a federal conservative. He's more of a centrist, and frankly, he spent the last 5 or 6 years working really closely with the federal Liberal government, first of Justin Trudeau, and now with Mark Carney. Chrystia Freeland, he counts as a personal friend. You remember when we did the story, David, of the first phone call that Pierre Poilievre ever made to Doug Ford 2.5 years after Poilievre became Conservative leader on March 17th. So literally 6 days before the federal election was called, and as the Tory polls were already starting to decline, that was the first time that they had ever Poilievre had ever reached out to Ford. Ford the next day had Chrystia Freeland at his home making coffee and then invited her as a special guest to the swearing in of his cabinet. I was actually surprised. Sabrina was mentioning the throne speech. I was actually looking out for Ms. Freeland at the throne speech because the throne speech was in her riding. Queen's Park's in her riding, and at University of Rosedale, where I'm actually sitting now. So Freeland is my MP now, even though I don't vote in elections, but she is riding distribution. I used to be in Spadina, Fort York. So
gotcha.
Laura's got Karina Gould as her MP. So
okay, look, but I just want to look. This is Ontario right now. It is blank. If we go back to this is roughly. There's some changes because this is the new ridings with the old vote overlaid. But let's talk about how this can affect them. So Sabrina, I want to start with you if I can. Like, let's look at the Greater Toronto area. I mean, it's all red. I mean, except for like Thornhill and Toronto St. Paul. But you know, a lot of these areas on the edges of Toronto proper, that's where Doug Ford wins. And so, Sabrina, if Doug Ford and Poilievre's Conservatives are not playing nice with each other and are openly feuding, I mean, do they get the ground game? Do they get the organization to break into these areas? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, initially we had heard Doug Ford sort of warning his caucus, you know, don't go out and canvass for the federal conservatives, you know, unless you're doing it in your spare time. And we have seen a lot of, you know, ministers, a lot of staffers out, you know, canvassing, door knocking, supporting the federal candidates. But, you know, in Ontario, we tend to elect opposites, right? It's that good old Underhill theory that if we vote Conservatives in at Queen's Park, we tend to vote Liberals over on the Hill and vice versa. And so I think we could start seeing some of that dynamic at play there. But like I said, they do have some strong candidates. You mentioned Thornhill, Melissa Lanceman, Karen Sins over in Eglinton Lawrence there. But yeah, I think, you know, at the end of the day, when Doug Ford says the truth hurts, I think he's also sort of just defending his campaign manager there. We know there's no love lost between those two. But at the end of the day, I think, you know, Ford was asked and he sort of took the bait there too.
Okay, so Laura, look, the GTA, that's the prize, right? Like, if you look at seat projections where they're likely to go, the Conservatives have got to get over 70 seats in Ontario. And they're not going to do that without like a 905 breakthrough. But you got Hamilton, you get down to the Niagara, you got Kitchener, you got London, you got Windsor. All of this area in southwestern Ontario, that's where Trump matters in a very profound way, like the auto sector and the manufacturing sector. If Conservatives are at war with Conservatives, what happens in this part of Ontario?
Well, look, I mean, I don't think you could discount the NDP too, right? And the way that the vote splits don't seem to be happening this time around. A weak NDP certainly would benefit the Liberals. I'm not sure how much, you know, the personal battle between Doug Ford and Pierre Poilievre is going to matter on a riding by riding level. It may be seen as a distraction. It might be seen as unseemly by some people. If Doug Ford were out saying, vote for Pierre Poilievre, I'm stumping for Poilievre, would that make a huge difference? I'm not sure. I know, as Sabrina mentioned, there are MPs and ministers at the local level who are out canvassing for their local candidates. Stephen Lecce, a high-profile minister in Ford's government, said today he does that in his riding. Caroline Mulrooney was out endorsing him. So I'm not sure if it's more of a kind of a sideshow freak show going on, which is the battle of Poilievre versus Ford and the personal kind of vendettas that seem to be playing out in public that is mostly a distraction, or if, you know, how strong Ford's endorsement and word would be to tip some of the scales here.
But, you know, Benzie, I want to ask about that because Nick Kouvalis, the pollster, has been saying some stuff. Doug Ford's pollster, he does the internal polling for the Ontario PCs. He was saying some stuff on Twitter yesterday that, you know, when advance voting was happening in Ontario, the Conservatives had a big rally here in Ottawa, you know, for the ag campaign thing they did around Valentine's Day. And people were pulled off the polls for that. They were ordered not to help certain candidates in the PC Ontario thing. And they had some ridings that he pointed to where they lost by a couple of hundred votes. If the NDP vote in Ontario is collapsing and it's going red, boy, oh boy, oh boy, if you don't have the Ontario PCs helping you at full capacity, that could cost you some real key seats if you're the federal Conservatives in Ontario, could it not?
It very well could. I mean, remember, the Liberals win elections by winning by small margins in lots of places in Ontario, and to a lesser extent in Quebec. I think that this is the problem, and another problem that is Nick Kavalos did the polling, does the most detailed political polling in Ontario of any pollster. He is in the field every single week for Premier Ford, and he also does the federal test as well. And now we know because Mr. Premier Ford ordered the release of one of his internal polls a few weeks ago that showed the Conservatives 15 points behind the Liberals in Ontario, and in the city of Ottawa, including the riding that Mr. Poilievre is running in, it was something like 51 to 22 for the Liberals. So Mr. Poilievre, that poll suggested Mr. Poilievre could be in trouble in his own riding, and that's a really important. Though that campaign research's polling is very significant because they study Ontario more in depth than anyone else, and are in the field so often. So when that poll came out, all of us were poring over it because it tells you where this race will be won. It looks bad for the Tories in southwestern Ontario. It looks bad for them in the 905. It looks bad for them in the city of Toronto, where of course it all started with them winning Don Stewart in that by-election last summer. That was the beginning of the end for Justin Trudeau. I wonder, in retrospect, David, if maybe they wish they hadn't won that by-election. Trudeau might have lived to fight another election, and then Pierre Poilievre would almost certainly be winning this election.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of stories to think about. If they blow the 25-point lead and lose this election, did they slay their dragon too early? Did they waste money carpet bombing the NDP's reputation? And why didn't they build relationships with the Ontario Conservatives and the Nova Scotia Conservatives the way they needed? All right, quick final thoughts on what you expect in Ontario in 2 weeks. Laura, your thoughts, and then Benzie, and then Sabrina.
Well, look, I think it's still a pretty close race, right? I don't think we can say today that with certainty the Liberals are going to win. It's certainly looking like from the polls they're up in Ontario. I think the debates are going to matter. I think missteps can still happen. But right now, on the issue of leadership, on the issue of taking on Donald Trump, Mark Carney seems to have the edge. And Mr. Poilievre is rolling out all kinds of policy announcements on the daily to do with a variety of topics, but it doesn't seem to be punching through. I think also the issue of collaboration, the way that governments work together, I think people like that. And maybe there's a sense here that, hey, look, Doug Ford could work with Mark Carney. We can keep those EV deals. We can keep the auto sector afloat. Maybe that's in people's minds when they're going to head to the polls in a couple of weeks. But I think, for one of the first times in federal politics, we really don't know what's going to happen on April 28th.
Okay. All right. Quick thoughts, Benzie, then Sabrina, because we got to get to some other stuff.
I don't want to make a prediction, but I predict that Doug Ford thinks he knows who's going to win the election, and it ain't Pierre Poilievre. But I'm not making that prediction. I'm just saying that was the impression that I'm getting from Mr. Ford.
Yeah, that's true. The Doug Ford decision desk has a preference, that's for sure. Sabrina, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's not too late for a Hail Mary, but I think, the trump card is the wild card in all of this. Like there's still so much uncertainty there. And, the more chaos there is south of the border, I think the more that works in Mark Carney's favor.
Okay, Laura Stone, Rob Benzie, Sabrina Nanji, always appreciate it. We'll be watching Ontario and all the other provinces and territories on election day. Thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to check in on where the main party leaders were today. And first, the Conservatives. As Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre was in Montreal, where he announced his plan to stop scammers from targeting seniors.
Our seniors deserve to feel safe and secure when they pick up their phones, iPads, or computers. So if you are a bank or telco, we want you to do everything you can to protect our beloved seniors who built this country.
Poilievre says he will require banks and cell phone companies to improve scam detection, flag risks, and block criminals who target seniors. The CBC's Catherine Tunney has more. Catherine.
David, tariffs are back in the news, but for the second day in a row, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is trying to punch through with the issue he wants Canadians to think about when they cast their ballot: crime. Today, the leader vowed to crack down on scams targeting seniors. He says a Poilievre government would force banks and telecom companies to stop fraudsters. He's also promising to create a new criminal code offense and bring in massive fines for those convicted of swindling seniors. The focus pitch to seniors comes as some polling suggests Liberal leader Mark Carney is a preferred candidate amongst boomers, especially older women. David?
All right, Kath, that's the CBC's Catherine Tunney in Montreal. Now to the Liberal campaign. And Liberal leader Mark Carney was also in the Montreal area in a suburb presenting his plan to help workers develop new skills.
My government will launch a new sector-specific mid-career training and upskilling benefit in priority sectors: manufacturing, construction, tech, and artificial intelligence.
Carney says the benefit will provide up to $15,000 per person for skills training in those sectors. Today's announcement, though, was overshadowed by fallout from U.S. President Trump's trade war. The CBC's Kate McKenna is traveling with the Liberals. Kate.
David, we've seen throughout this campaign that Liberal leader Mark Carney is much more comfortable when he's able to talk about how he would handle Donald Trump. So much of his campaign has been focused on being a stable voice in a time of crisis. Well, today Donald Trump was a main subject, and that's because there was a report that came out of Japan that Honda was looking to potentially take some of its Canadian jobs and move them to the United States because of Donald Trump's auto tariffs. Now, Honda Canada has since come out and said that that's not true, but Mark Carney was asked about that today. Here's what he had to say.
We are seeing some of the impacts in the short term of that with layoffs for some of our automakers, potential shifts in production if this situation remains. Huge increase in costs, ultimately to American consumers, obviously to Canadian consumers. Our focus is on jobs and growth here in Canada. It's misguided. It's not going to work.
We know, of course, the federal government is in caretaker mode, but Ottawa did announce some new incentives today to keep manufacturers in Canada. Mark Carney, of course, was on the campaign trail, but he used some of the same language we've been hearing from him throughout the campaign, saying that Canada's relationship with the United States has fundamentally changed. David?
Thank you, Kate. That's the CBC's Kate McKenna in Montreal. Well, let's check in on the New Democrats now. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh was also in Montreal, saying he wants to revive a scrapped Liberal tax policy.
The way capital gains works right now is if you are working hard, you're a nurse, a teacher, an electrician, a plumber, you work hard, your entire salary is taxable. But if you sit at home and sell shares, only half of the money you make is taxable.
Singh called this unfair and said he would bring back the capital gains tax increase that the Liberals introduced in the last federal budget. The CBC's Olivia Stevanovich has more on this. Olivia.
David, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh gave a preview today of how he plans to attack his main political rival during the debates. Singh announced he wants to revive a policy Liberal leader Mark Carney scrapped during his first week as Prime Minister. Singh says he wants to move forward with a hike to the amount of capital gains that are subject to tax, increasing the inclusion rate from 1/2 to 2/3 on all capital gains over $250,000, including those from individuals, corporations, and trusts. The Liberals scrapped the idea after businesses and doctors warned it could stifle growth. But Singh says he wants to move forward with it anyway, criticizing the Liberals for walking back on their promise of ensuring tax fairness. Singh says he would use the extra cash to pay for NDP policies, such as pharmacare to cover essential medicines, introducing national rent control, and placing a cap on grocery prices. David?
Thank you, Olivia. This is CBC's Olivia Stefanovich in Montreal. Well, finally to the Bloc Québécois. And you guessed it, Bloc leader Yves-François Blanchet spent his day in and around Montreal. He reiterated his intention to get rid of the religious exemption for hate speech.
If a priest, if a representative of any religion, if a believer of any religion whatsoever uses religion to support hate, to support radicalization of our youth, to support a man dominating a woman in any way, I believe this is a crime. It has to be punished as a crime in whatever language for whatever religion.
At a later press conference, Blanchet also called for an increase to federal health transfers to Quebec. The CBC's Evan Dyer is covering the Bloc Québécois for us this week. Evan.
David, the Bloc campaign has just rolled into Saint-Adèle here in the Laurentians for a small rally. This is a ski town, normally a little bit north of Montreal. Today's announcement from the Bloc Québécois was a proposal to remove the religious exemption from Canadian hate speech laws. That's an exemption that allows people to say things that might otherwise get them in trouble, but cite scripture essentially in order to do so. This is the second criminal justice announcement in a couple of days, and we have seen a bit of a focus on that issue, which perhaps says something about the electoral dynamics here in Quebec. Quebec is a place where there are quite a few conservative bloc switchers or potential switchers, certainly more than there have traditionally been liberal bloc switchers, and that focus on criminal justice issues may perhaps be an attempt to pry some of those conservative or potentially conservative votes back into the bloc fold. I should say also that the Bloc today is reacting to what it sees as some good news with that change of schedule for tomorrow's French language debate. That was a pretty important issue for them, that hockey game conflict where the Canadians might have been playing at the same time as the only French language debate, where they really have a chance to turn around this erosion that they've seen of their vote towards the Liberals. Would have been a major blow to the party, and today they were expressing some satisfaction at the decision of the Commission to change that. David.
Okay, Evan, thank you. That's the CBC's Evan Dyer traveling with the Bloc Québécois. All right, we're going to take a quick break, but coming up on Power and Politics, why an Ivy League professor is leaving Trump's America for a job at the University of Toronto. Stay with us. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre took aim today at what he called woke Liberal Party policies.
We need to unite all Canadians around our common promise, a promise that hard work gets you a great life on a safe street Unfortunately, the Liberals have been distracted from that mission. I think of, for example, their woke criminal justice agenda, which releases the same radically violent criminals onto our streets again and again and again. Instead of that, we should lock up the criminals. Their woke agenda on spending has doubled our debt, given us the worst inflation in 40 years.
Now, south of the border, U.S. President Donald Trump has also been on a campaign to eliminate woke ideology from college campuses. And today, Trump threatened to withdraw funding from Harvard University after the university failed to comply with the White House's demands. Jason Stanley is a philosophy professor at Yale University who recently made public his decision to leave the U.S. for Canada, in part because of this, and he joins me now. Jason Stanley, it's good to see you. Thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you for having me on.
So we're seeing today that the president has threatened Harvard's tax-exempt status, as well as frozen $2 billion, with a B, dollars in funding. This is the sort of thing that caused you to leave. I mean, what are you thinking as you're watching all of this unfold?
Well, attacks on universities for cultural Marxism and political correctness and, advancing an LGBTQ or leftist agenda. These are the harbingers of autocracy all over the world. It's how Viktor Orban started his election campaign in Hungary, attacking Central European University for leftism. You know that authoritarianism and the dismantling of your country is coming when they target the universities. And then in the United States, the Trump administration is targeting the world's greatest university system. And if you take that down, you're taking, a lot of what's great about my country now.
The threatening Harvard now, they targeted Columbia because of the occupations that happened there, and $400 million in federal money was on the line there, and Columbia buckled, right? They gave the U.S. administration what they wanted, and you said this was one of the reasons you decided you and like your other colleagues, leaving Yale to go to the University of Toronto. I mean, is this a one-off? Is this a trend? Where do you see this potentially going in the United States?
Well, I think Canada stands to benefit from this all. I mean, the attack on our universities, the attack on our intellectual class, the dismantling of our government, the addressing every social problem with tax cuts that are going to go to billionaires, let's face it, and the super wealthy. All of this is going to dismantle the United States, and it's a gain for Canada. As long as Canada stands up for the Canadian values of supporting its citizens and academic freedom, these are values that are going to attract not just academics and researchers, but many more people from the United States.
You specialize in fascism, and you've written about it extensively. And during the election campaign, there were members of Trump's first administration who were warning that he had fascist tendencies, autocratic leanings, and now we're seeing not ignorance of the courts, but ignoring the courts, usurping Congress through executive order. I mean, where do you think the trajectory of Trump 2.0 potentially goes?
I don't think you can legitimately call the United States a constitutional democracy anymore. Trump yesterday, in a very extreme development, said that he wanted to start transferring homegrown people to El Salvador's concentration camps, where he's already sent migrants, and the courts have ordered him to return some of them, and he's categorically refused. So he's openly simply ignored the Supreme Court even. So it's a constitutional crisis, and Trump always says what he's going to do, and he said he's going to be a king. And so that's what we're seeing. And the United States, it looks like it's fallen to an autocrat with designs, an autocrat who has designs on Canada.
Obviously, Trump and his actions and the nature of his administration is fueling the thought process of voters in the Canadian election here. One of the criticisms of Mr. Poilievre, the Conservative leader, is that he's too much like Trump, at least tonally and stylistically. He's promising to crack down on things like woke ideology, also wants to defund public broadcasting, as Trump wants to do in the United States. What do you make of the comparisons the critics have of the conservative leader compared to what Donald Trump is doing? Because it seems like there is a gulf of difference between the two. How do you view this?
I have not yet delved into Canadian politics, and Canada is distinguished by its not taking the American route. America has, even before Trump, America had before El Salvador and Bukele, America had the highest incarceration rate in the world.
Right.
So most of our states had higher incarceration rates than any other country in the world. So we were already a police state. Going in the direction of mass incarceration destroys the soul and character of a country. So there were already deep worries. And fascism, according to a lot of the classic literature, like Césaire, is when they start doing to white people what they have long been doing to people of color. And so that's a lot of what we're seeing today is the police state that was erected in the run-up to mass incarceration, now directed against migrants, and possibly now to student protesters and ordinary and other civilians.
But what is happening there is an extreme example beyond the rhetorical similarities, right? I think, I know you say you haven't studied the Canadian election and politics too deeply, but a stylistic similarity and a substance similarity, there's a big difference, right?
I don't know enough, but defunding public media, I'm very strongly against that. Canada represents for the world the support, government support of the instruments of democracy. And what are the institutions of democracy? The free press, the universities and schools, and the courts. And you see any attack on them, and it's a bad sign. As I said, I haven't yet followed Canadian politics, but the government needs to support the press, and attacks on the press are a canary in the coal mine.
Jason Stanley, it was good to meet you, sir. Thank you for joining us this evening. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, the Power Rankings panel is here to talk about the key moments on the campaign trail today as federal leaders gear up for the debates.
I'm going to concentrate on neither attack nor defense, but I will focus on transparency to inform those Canadians who choose to watch the debate.
So what's at stake for the federal leaders in all of this? That discussion next. All right, welcome back to Power and Politics. It's time for our daily Power Rankings. They're here to talk about the key moments on the campaign trail today. And I am joined now by Karleen Verheyen, a three-time Liberal War Room spokesperson on past campaigns. Rachel Siegel, I got to step out of the way. Rachel Siegel is a former director of policy in the Stephen Harper government and co-host of the Beyond a Ballot podcast. And Cheryl Oates was the director of communications for former Alberta NDP Premier Rachel Notley. Good to see you all. Look, tomorrow, the first of two debates in this campaign. Party leaders have 2 hours less, Karleen, to prepare because they moved it up to 6 o'clock from 8 o'clock to avoid totally overlapping with the Montreal Canadiens game. And what do you make of this move?
Oh, well, my first thought was, how much of an audience overlap do we really think we have here? You know, I think it's probably the most Canadian news story or development I've seen in a long time. It's great to try and get as many people to watch leaders' debates during an election as possible, especially one as consequential as this. If moving it because of a hockey game happens to do that, then I'm all for it.
They could have moved the hockey game to Thursday. No, I'm just kidding. Rachel, what do you think of this?
Well, I think we've seen it before. In 2011, we had an issue with hockey too, and the debate was moved then, so it's not surprising. But for us Western Canadian folks, this is very, very early. So forget hockey, forget the debate. People are going to be at work, and they are going. A lot of people have said to me around here that they're now upset they won't be able to see the debate, which is at 3 p.m. tomorrow and 4 p.m. On Thursday. So the Western Canada wants in.
Right?
Yeah, look, the enormous francophone population of British Columbia is going to be devastated. I don't know. Look,
we're going to be reading the closed captions, David.
All right, I gotcha. Cheryl, your thoughts on this move?
Yeah, I think there's so few opportunities in debate where the public gets to watch their leaders raw and unfiltered, held up for questioning side by side and have their policies compared. This is only successful if people actually watch it. And if you're going to lose even a portion of your audience to a hockey game, and it is possible for the debate to be moved, I absolutely think this was the right idea. I think the more eyes on it, the better. And I think it's a very cute Canadian story that we have to accommodate the hockey schedule.
The rest of the world will not understand this, but, you know, in Canada, people, yeah, it kind of makes sense. All right, Cheryl, look, this brings us to your pick. You want to talk about the debates. I mean, this is the last sort of set pieces of this campaign. You want to talk about the stakes.
I do. I think the stakes are high for this debate. It's not in every election that debates really can be a deciding factor in terms of the outcome of an election, but they are rarely inconsequential. And I think in this debate, with the volatility that we've seen in the polling, the stakes are really high, and two of these leaders are untested. I mean, Mark Carney, can he hold up to attacks without sounding like a banker trying to explain inflation at a dinner party? Can Pierre Poilievre, look like a prime minister and not like he's auditioning to be an attack dog opposition leader? This is his chance to really walk on that stage and prove it. And then for Jagmeet Singh, I mean, this is his chance to prove in real time, demonstrating to Canadians that he can hold these two party leaders to account and that he needs a place, and Canadians should want him to have a place in Parliament to continue to do that.
You know, public understanding of the economy might have been better if we'd had a banker explain inflation at a dinner party a few times over the last couple of years, but here we are. Rachel, what are your thoughts on the stakes of this? I mean, a big night for Mr. Blanchet tomorrow, for sure, because they're kind of getting squeezed the way the NDP are getting squeezed, but then Thursday, a big night for Pierre Poilievre. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, and I think that it's a big night for all of them. I mean, just take Jagmeet Singh. I'm really hoping that he has a Jack Layton moment. You'll remember in 2011.
You want those vote splits? Is that what you're saying, Rachel?
No, I just want to see real players in this race. And 2011, we saw Jack Layton come out from behind after the debate. And maybe on Thursday night, we'll see that with Jagmeet Singh. Tomorrow, I think, will be very interesting for two reasons. One, because Mark Carney struggled so much with his French during the French debate in the leadership. And I think Canadians want a prime minister who can clearly communicate in both official languages. The other reason being Blanchet, obviously, and him trailing in Quebec, trying to really pick up more of those seats, and how he will position himself against the other two frontrunners, Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre. That's what I'm watching for over the next couple of days.
Karleen, how do you see this one? Because Mr. Blanchet has got to sort of like get some energy back into the Bloc campaign with this debate tomorrow and tout le monde en parle on Sunday. Mark Carney, people who speak French tell me it's gotten a lot better since the Liberal leaders debate to tout le monde en parle. I can't judge it. What do you think? What are the stakes the next two nights?
Well, I'm going to betray my liberal loyalties for one quick second here and say that for the last 3 election cycles, I have really looked forward to the French leaders debate because I think that Yves-François Blanchet is one of the most talented politicians that we currently have in the House of Commons. He's a real delight to watch speaking, and in particular sparring and question period and in the debate. So I'm really looking forward to him getting a little bit of a spotlight tomorrow night. I think with reference to your question about Mark Carney, you are right, David, in that Mark Carney tomorrow night and Thursday night is heading into an arena where he is decidedly the underdog. He's going up against 3 very seasoned politicians, 2 of which have done this leaders debate cycle in more than one election past. And even as a party leader newbie, Pierre Poilievre has had 20 plus years in the House of Commons just waiting for this moment. Carney hasn't really had that chance to do a real debate. Even the liberal leadership debates where he was a contestant were really events where everybody was vehemently agreeing with one another, as I'm sure you remember, David. So I do think that Mark Carney probably has the most uphill climb here in terms of being able to act like a politician, pivot on topics that he doesn't want to be talking about, have the discipline to stay on message. He'll really have to rely on his own competence, intelligence, and actual vision for the country, and hope that he can successfully communicate that to Canadians in the context of a debate, which is sometimes tough for that.
Right. Okay, so Rachel, Carlene says 3 very experienced opponents for Mark Carney, but there is a 4th opponent for Mark Carney, and that's Jonathan Pedno, the Green leader. And this is your pick today. You don't like this whole outcome.
I don't, and maybe it's the lawyer in me, but I think rules are rules, and the rules for a party to join the debate are 1, they need to have an elected MP. 2, they need to be polling at least 4%. The Greens are currently at 2.7, so they don't meet that threshold. And 3, they need to have candidates in riding 90% of ridings. The Greens currently have 60% of ridings with a Green candidate in them. For me, this was a problem today. The debate commission is allowing the Greens to have the stage, and it's great. I think the more voices, the merrier. But in a commission that is costing Canadians millions of dollars to put together these debates, when they sit down and set those rules, they really should stick to them, because we want to make sure this is an even playing field. And if you're going to let somebody with less than 4% of the support of Canadians into the debate, why not just let everybody?
Okay, so Cheryl, Rachel's green top there is not a sign of partisan support for Jonathan Pedno and the party with this. But Cheryl, what's even kind of fishier about this is that they sent a list of names to the debates commission and said, yeah, we've got this many people, and now they don't. And it's kind of a wishy-washy explanation of they pulled some people out for strategic reasons, people felt bullied and threatened and didn't run, and they don't meet 2 of the 3 criteria, yet they're allowed into the debate. I mean, what do you think of this, Cheryl?
Yeah, I think a promise to run a full slate of candidates does not equal meeting the threshold for the rules here. And I think that the debate commission allowing the Greens to participate, despite the fact that they had problems nominating candidates in over 100 ridings, is a really slippery slope. Like, of course, if a party is contending to lead the country or influence the direction of the country in a really meaningful way, of course they should be on the debate stage. But this is why the commission sets rules, so that we can set a standard for who those parties are and who's actually vying to influence the country in a meaningful way. And the Greens have fallen short of that standard. I'm worried that if there's no rules, if the Greens can bypass the rules, that, down the road, every fringe party can do the same.
And Carlene, I wonder, like, changing the time, I understand it's for viewership, but if you're looking at who this advantages, moving the debate up, that's really a big boost to the Bloc Québécois. Like, this is the only province and the only language they compete in, and they get a more favorable viewing time for them. And yet you have this situation, so they can change some things and not others. It is an interesting moment that may change this in the next election. I don't know.
The Debates Commission hasn't, in my view, offered an explanation for the decision they took that's fully satisfactory. I agree with your characterization that it was a bit wishy-washy. I read their written statement to the media very carefully, looking for a better understanding of exactly why they decided that it was all right that the Green Party had not met the conditions that they established before. And it just isn't enough to say, well, we didn't have the ability to properly plan a substantive debate. without them, didn't have the ability to pivot. I mean, if you can't pivot with over a week's notice to organize a debate, I'm not sure what you're doing organizing a debate. It doesn't seem that difficult. The real losers here, I think, are all of the participants who were hoping for an opportunity for more airtime to speak to Canadians. And really, that's the NDP and the Bloc Québécois, who have so far not been able to really get as much oxygen in the campaign, I think, as they wanted. They're now losing time to somebody who, as Rachel pointed out, is polling at less than 3% nationally. And I imagine they're not very happy about that.
Yeah. Well, look, the CBC is organizing the debate, so I feel attacked. No, I'm just kidding. But, you have to adjust. And, there are no participation medals in politics. You do it or you don't. And that's just kind of the way it works. So we'll see if it changes down the road. So, Carlene, let's get to your pick. You think Mark Carney's on an up today. Walk me through why.
Well, I think he got some really flattering investment adulation in the last number of days. And that's because it has been revealed by a couple of investigative journalists that I think 7 in total Conservative MPs have, in fact, trusted them with much of their life savings by investing in some of the Brookfield investment funds that he managed while he was there. These are the same funds that the Conservative Party attacked repeatedly over the last number of weeks because of them being registered in Caribbean countries that have a lower corporate tax rate than Canada. And the reason that I think that this is so interesting, David, is because ever since Carney kind of emerged on the political scene as a leadership contestant, the Conservative Party has, and I think I'm being objective here, struggled a bit to land a criticism or a flaw of Carney's that would really stick. And I think they thought they found a winner in this narrative about his history with Brookfield, managing all of these investment funds, and the fact that some of them were in tax havens. Right. That all kind of falls apart when you find out that I think the Conservative Party leader himself, but certainly the deputy leader and a number of MPs in the caucus were invested in those very funds and taking advantage of the returns that they offered. But that's not actually the most interesting part. The fact that it's backfiring in a kind of problematic way is what's most interesting to me. So what Canadians are hearing now is, okay, well, Conservatives trust Mark Carney to manage their finances, their personal finances. We're in a time when Canadians, I think, are looking for calm, competent leadership. And all that this has really done with these millions of dollars that they've poured into ads about Mark Carney and his history at Brookfield have just kind of highlighted the stark contrast between the two leaders vying to be prime minister. One who has a very deep history in the banking and finance sector, and one who, as far as I know, has never even run a hot dog stand. I don't think it's helpful to their efforts to paint Poilievre as somebody who's ready to govern. Okay, I got to jump in. Pierre Poilievre has never invested in these funds. He bought into Vanguard Securities or Financial. They own a group that has part of it. But Melissa Lantsman and others did, and Rachel, I'll bring you in here. I mean, this was first reported by Daniela Blanca, Radio Canada. Carney's green funds at Brookfield used Bermuda tax havens to attract investors. Melissa Lantsman tweeted out that story saying Mark Carney dodged Canadian taxes using offshore tax havens while running Brookfield. She bought shares in the fund that is registered in Bermuda. So did her spouse, so did other members of the caucus. Square, can you, I'm not holding you accountable for it, but can you square it for me?
There's a significant difference between running Brookfield and becoming the prime minister and holding Brookfield within an ETF amongst many other investors.
No, the ETF is Pierre Poilievre. Melissa Lantsman's a direct purchase of shares in the fund.
There is a significant difference between running the country and running Brookfield and holding a few shares of Brookfield. To Carlene's point, Mark Carney also came out and said that he had never been involved with the move to the U.S. 2 days later, a letter came out with his signature on it about the move to the U.S. Mark Carney has never disclosed any of his assets. To this day, we have no idea what he holds. We know what every single member of the Conservative caucus holds.
Well, yes, we do, and it's Brookfield. That's part of the problem, isn't it? Like I get it. We're going to, trying to litigate, we've gone over the blind trust, the disclosure, but they've criticized these funds as unethical, and they're buying into the funds. So are they unethical or not? I guess
I don't think they criticized them and then bought into them, but There is a significant difference between running to be the prime minister and having been the leader of Brookfield and making decisions on behalf of that company to investing certain stocks.
Okay, I got to get Cheryl in. No, finish your thoughts. Right, just let you know I got to get Cheryl in because I'm running a show. I got 45 seconds.
We also don't know what Mark Carney is holding in terms of his investment currently in Brookfield. We have no idea because he hasn't disclosed a thing to Canadians, and yet he's asking for our vote.
Okay, Cheryl?
Okay, so from the very beginning here, the Conservatives have vilified Brookfield and by extension, Mark Carney. And when you are buying into the actual firm, the actual fund that you're vilifying, you are not only undermining your punch, but you're losing your own integrity and your own credibility. And this is all happening on the eve of the election. And I'm sure Pierre Poilievre has been practicing these kind of lines as he does his debate prep. What they have done by this story coming out today is basically gift wrapping a counterpunch for Mark Carney and taking this topic off the table for the debate if they don't feel like they have a leg to stand on. So now the Conservatives have a choice. Do they pivot before the election and find a new storyline?
Okay, we got to leave it there. I got to pivot because Ian Hannamansing's show is coming up next. Curling Brian, Rachel Siegel, Cheryl Oates, always a pleasure. We're going to have live coverage of the federal leaders debate, 6 o'clock Eastern now. Tomorrow, the French debate is happening there. You can watch that with translation wherever you watch CBC News. I'm David Cochrane. Thank you for watching Power and Politics. We'll see you tomorrow live from Montreal. Hannamansing Tonight is up next.